Hello everyone, it's Grandmama. Time for another story from a hometown scrapbook by Ben Weatherwax. Today's story, Old Tiger. Hello there. The recent election in Hoquiam that approved a levy for new firefighting equipment appears to be the last step necessary to start the municipal wheels turning to give Grays Harbor a better firefighting organization. In both Hoquiam and Aberdeen, the smoke eaters have been fighting the flames with little more than their bare hands for the past several years, as the old equipment gives way to time and friction. And when it's the fire underwriters, the fellows who make the notes about a community's fire prevention and control efficiency, gave a look down their noses at Aberdeen and Hoquiam's equipment, the city fathers in the two towns had plenty of reason to worry. For higher insurance rates can have quite an effect on a community in dollars and cents, in the black eye that it gives a place, and finally, it was pretty serious business to be without adequate protection for the big industrial plants that are the lifeblood of the harbor. But this is not a lecture on insurance. It's a page in our scrapbook that has to do with a historic old piece of equipment that wrote a lot of history of Aberdeen and Grays Harbor, and was a historic object before it even came to the harbor. It's the old fire engine that folks call Old Tiger, and it has quite a background, including a highlight that a few old-timers will never forget. So when George has taken a customary few seconds for our sponsors, we'll open the scrapbook to the story of Old Tiger and its long life of service and its great day in the sun. But here's George and a word from our sponsor. Now, the early cities that grew up along the shores of Grays Harbor were about as combustible as a barrel of black powder, and the residents who lived in them were conscious of always present danger of fire. In fact, Aberdeen and Hoquiam had several very disastrous fires before Aberdeen was burned out in the Great Fire of 1903. And the Great Hoquiam Hotel Holocaust leveled that elegant landmark of the gay 1890s. And anyone with any discernment could look down the streets of the wooden cities with their plank sidewalks and sawdust streets and see what a good fire with a brisk wind behind it could do. It was a popular thing to predict a great fire in one of the cities, and the city council and the business bureau or chamber of commerce were constantly being besieged by someone or some group to do something more to protect the cities from the fire fiend. But actually, there wasn't much they could do. With wooden buildings built gutter to gutter through the residential area, no amount of firefighting gear could do much to stop the blaze once it got started. Not that the towns were without firefighting equipment. Oh no, Aberdeen got a hand pumper engine first, and it led by the other cities of Hoquiam and Cosmopolis. It happened in the early 1890s when Aberdeen was organizing a volunteer firefighting group. Cy Stapleford, Albert Richo, Billy Pearson, Joe Neves, Anthony D'Amateo, Joe Graham, Charlie Coer, Ed Pyatt, Sam Bowes, Bill Ansid, Tom Murphy, Joe Graham, Frank Ratty, and some others started a Smoke Eaters Club. That's what it was. It was a volunteer fire department in the best tradition of its days. For, along with the blue uniforms with the brass button and the stiff-billed caps with the big brass insignia with the initials AFD in the center of the wreath, there was a certain social distinction to belonging to this band of fearless firefighters. Their initials plans included one for a club room combined with a fire hall where they could hold dances and public parties, and of course there was a plan for a fire engine. The volunteers were ready and willing to do the work, but they had to have something to work with. So their first task was to provide the city with water to fight the fire. That was done when a system of pumping water from the harbor into a storage tank near the foot of Broadway was worked out, and hydrants placed around through the business district as strategic as they could. Then came the problem of the engine. The volunteers pleaded their case before the city council, which was trying to stretch its budget to cover the new sidewalks, streets, and a host of other things. And finally, after businessmen of the town had sided with the volunteers, the council agreed to buy an engine for the city, if one could be found that was reasonably priced. They didn't say what reasonably priced meant, but City Treasurer C.T. Wooding inferred that it meant the cheapest one that they could find. And he went hunting. Now, long before there was a city of Aberdeen or a city of Hoquiam, or for that matter, enough people living on the harbor to earn considered such things as a fire engine, a little sailing packet had taken on a load of a brightly polished brass and red-painted fire engine at a New England port and carted it around the Horn to Portland. And there the city council surveyed a wooden city, much the same as Aberdeen and Hoquiam were ordained to be, laid out the cash for the brand new machine, and put it into the city's fire barn as a guarantee against an holocaust that might ravage the city. But Portland, you recall, if you know your Northwest history, grew into quite a strapping community before there were many other cities in the Northwest to compete with it. And before Aberdeen got to the build-up stage where it needed fire protection, the city on the Willamette had peddled the engine to the town of Salem for its fire protection, and the Salem had hauled it to a few fires, and the pump handled and steamed the water from the little machine licked at the flames. But now Salem was getting a new horse-drawn engine with a steam boiler, and it was ready to sell the old firefighter for what they could get out of it. Wooding heard of the engine and wrote to Salem requesting a quotation on the engine. After some dickering, the price was agreed to, and Salem shipped the engine via Portland on the schooner to Aberdeen. Sam Ben, who had a little knowledge of firefighting equipment as a result of his sojourn in New York, protested the price that had been paid for the engine, and Treasurer Wooding admitted that he knew nothing about engines and only paid the price asked. But the town had it, and when it had been polished a bit and touched up with red paint, it was a mighty handsome piece of equipment. And the volunteers turned out on Sunday morning in their blue uniforms to run the old Tiger up and down Heron Street and finally haul it into the lot at the edge of the Wishkah River and throw the feeder line into the stream, and with all hands on the pump handles, they had a real stream of water going in no time. The town turned out to see, and for all the excitement it caused, it might have been the newest and finest equipment on the market. If the arrival of Hoquiam's and Aberdeen's new pumpers, fresh from Detroit, caused half the excitement that old Tiger caused, they'll have a pretty fancy day on their hands. The department had just about had time to acquaint themselves with the engine, then Aberdeen's hotel, the town's first hotel, right on the banks of the Wishkah River at the end of Heron Street, caught fire. The fire was in a perfect location for the volunteers. The water was at hand. It was only 2 blocks from the fire station. It was on the main street. But by the time the stream was squirting, the smoke eaters saw that the building was doomed and spent their time saving the buildings next to it. From that day on, with the citizens doubting the value of the engine, the volunteers trained like Olympic athletes, and they finally got so proficient that they could stretch a hose and get a stream going in a matter of seconds. Meanwhile, Hoquiam had a pumper, and Cosmopolis had matched Aberdeen with an engine that almost duplicated the Aberdeen pumper. All 3 towns had volunteer firefighting teams, and their skills with the pumping handles and the hose lines became a matter of civic pride. On the 4th of July and other holidays, the highlight of the celebration was the contest to see which of the volunteer departments could roll up their pumper, stretch hose lines to the hydrant, and get a stream of water going first. Billy Pearson and Joe Graham were Aberdeen's 2 best bets at unrailing the hose, while Cosmopolis had a 10-second man named Chester Paget who could sprint for the hydrant with the business end of the hose and make it race with anyone in the country. 10 seconds was a common time for the volunteers to roll up, unrail, and connect, and have a stream in the air. The competition was keen, and lots of folding money and gold pieces went down on the favorite teams when the competition was staged. Well, for a decade, the old hand pumper was Aberdeen's pride, and then in 1903, when the town boasted 7,000 souls, but what would have had a hard time producing them for any census, the city fathers again hearkened to the volunteers. The town was too big to be protected by an antiquated hand pumper. It was time to get some modern equipment, they said, and the city fathers kicked through. Charlie Cole was chief of the firefighters that year, and Billy Pearson the assistant, and A.J. West was the mayor, who told the city council to get behind the issue for a new engine. The volunteers got it. And in the late summer of 1903, it was unloaded at Burroughs Dock. It was a beautiful thing to look at, the town told itself, sleek and new, and the volunteers steamed it up and hitched the horse to it and gave it a tour of the town. And then, a few weeks later, on the 16th of October, Aberdeen was swept by fire. The big new pumper was hauled out and around the corner to the hotel where the fire had started, but hardly had it begun to pump water than it stopped. The mechanic worked furiously to fix it, but it was through for the day. Oh, it worked again once or twice, but for all of the good that it did, it might as well have been in some other country. And the volunteers looked frantically for something to take its place. The Hoquiam department was called and answered with their old hand pumper. Cosmopolis loaded their old pumper onto Captain Ed Van Sickle's tugboat, and the volunteers clambered aboard to make a quick trip to Aberdeen to help quell the blaze. And then, when it began to appear that the local department was out of the fight, with their engine broken, some of the volunteers rolled out Old Tiger, and the vulnerable hand pumper, with its crew of volunteers at the pump handles, fought such a fight as it had never fought before. When the fire was over, Chief Collier tried to explain the failure of the big pumper, but the town was unconvinced, and Old Tiger, which had come back from retirement for the last battle with the flames, enjoyed its last days of glory. After the big Aberdeen fire, as the city obtained an organized department, Old Tiger went into permanent retirement. First, the old city barn near where the Methodist Church stands today, then to a spot behind the library where it moldered in decay. The wheels came off and the pump handles decayed and dropped off. Finally, Councilman Grant requested that what was left of the honorable old fire to install in a park at D and Randall Street. Then in 1938, when Aberdeen was getting ready for its 50th birthday, the fire department took it over and rebuilt it and returned it to operation, manned it with a crew of strong backs. And when the town looked back on 50 years, Old Tiger was there, throwing a stream of water as it had before the town of Aberdeen. And well pressed, it comes out of retirement occasionally today to prove its durability, and that it does deserve a place in the sun and a page in our hometown scrapbook. Thanks for listening.